Welcome. Today I'm going to talk about some basics concerning silversmithing for the beginner. What you're going to need, different items that every silversmith is going to have, and I'll try to go over some of the basics as far as discussing metal and soldering, and kind of get you a general start, or a beginning anyway, and then we'll go on from there in later videos. Okay, I'm not a professional photographer, so you'll just have to bear with me, but first you're going to need a solder station. You're going to need some type of solder pad that you can keep the heat off of your workbench, I would suggest, and you're going to need a solder block or a solder brick. Now there's different types of things. Now you might want to use a solder stand for soldering. Sometimes when you solder bigger items like larger pendants and stuff, you need the heat from the bottom too, so you need a stand to get that off, because your block will absorb too much heat. You're also going to need a pickle pot. Now I use just a small cheap crock pot, which works fine. You know, it's just got to be something to warm it. You don't want it to get real hot and bubble your pickle, but your pickle works better whenever it's warm. And you'll need a little bowl to quench it in. And you'll need flux. Now this is the flux that I prefer. This is the Graflux one. It works real well. Now some people prefer liquid flux, but I think it's too messy. It gets all over you on your block, tears your block up and such as that. So you know, it's your preference. Now sometimes people like to solder on a charcoal block, which a charcoal block is fine for soldering on. I use it for other items. If I'm going to make beads or something like that, I'll use the charcoal block. You're also going to need some form of bench block for stamping and flattening your metal and different things like that. Now you need something at least 3/4 of an inch thick, and now this is a 4x4, which works good. I also have a smaller one that's a little bit thicker, and then I've got a spare 4x4 because sometimes you may need two, but to start out you just, you know, one good size 4x4 is a good size block. Now you're going to need a torch too. Now there's a lot of different types of torches. I have two that I use on my bench. I have the Little Smith, which is an oxygen and acetylene torch. It can do hotter work if you need it. It's a little bit harder to regulate. It's not really hard, but I'd say it takes a little adjustment, because you've got to make sure that you have a neutral flame whenever you're soldering up your work. If you get too much oxygen, you'll tend to oxidize your metal more. It'll build copper oxide, and it'll turn it black. That's fire scales. And now this other one here is both these are Smith torches, but this is a acetylene air torch. It has little holes in it that sucks the air in. Now this is an easy torch for those of you that don't want to have to adjust. Now if you need a hotter flame, you just change tips. They make different tips for it, so you'll change your tip. And now the little one has different tips too, but like I say, you have to adjust your oxygen and acetylene mixture and get them the same. And so for some it might be easier to go with the acetylene air or propane air or something like that. Now these are a little more expensive. You can actually use, if you're going to do silver and copper, you can actually use a little handheld rechargeable butane torch that some of the suppliers have. It's a small handheld. It's real portable, and I've seen some people turn out some nice work with it. Now you're also going to need a stamp. You need a stamp that tells what type of metal you're working with. That way you can put, when you're working with steel or sterling, or if you're working with fine silver, you can put a mark on it so people will know. And also you might want to get you a maker's mark, so that whenever you do your work you can mark it and people will know whose it is. Then they make different types. This one here is a 925 stamp, but it's bent, and this is so that you can stamp inside a ring if necessary. So there's a lot of different types of stamps out there. You just have to decide, and if you decide to get into stamping designs, well, then you might want to add some more stamps as far as different type of design stamps. Okay, normally, and then you're going to need some pliers, various pliers. Now, if you do wire wrapping, it's a lot of the same tools work fine for silversmithing. And you want to get a visor. A visor is something that's real important, so you can check your work and not strain your eyes. Now you'll need to add a few other items. You might need if I can get it loose here, a little block for sawing or piercing, as you call it. And this one just clamps to the counter. I can take it, put it there, and remove it. Now they do make other types, but this is just an inexpensive one that works. And you'll need a saw for piercing, and it has a real fine tooth blade, depending on how thick a metal you're cutting to which blade you'll need. I'm not sure if it's 2 or 3 teeth that they like to have on a piece of metal at all time, but I do know when you're cutting thin metal, if you use a blade with fewer teeth, you have a real hard time because it tries to hang the metal. So you will need that. Now, I have this Real Grand. I kind of like Real Grand. They've got a little everything, but I have their little file kit. Now you need some little files so you can take care of cleaning up your work. And I like to have one bigger file. Doesn't have to be real big, but so whenever I do my rough end work, when I'm cleaning up after I saw and stuff and shaping it, I can use it. I don't have a problem with slipping off it like I will with a little file. And I believe that's a number 2 file there. And you could get even a wider file if you want it. You're going to need a sanding stick. Now this you can make is just a piece of wood and wrap a piece of 400 grit sandpaper around. And if you want it even finer, I have another one that's 1200 grit if you want. But that'll take your saw marks out. And I like this diamond sanding pad. This is a 400 grit. This is good for leveling up the bottom of my bezels before I mount them onto the base plate. Okay, you're going to need some solder. Now usually, most commonly, you're going to use hard, medium, and easy. Now, very rarely you might use extra easy. So you want to make sure that you get some solder, and I keep it in these old film tubes because it keeps it from corroding. If your solder gets oxidation on it, then it's going to not work quite as well. It's going to work your flux harder. You're going to need a pair of copper tongs. You never want to stick steel tongs in your pickle. And you're going to need a solder pick for sure. That comes in real handy when you're soldering. Now we'll talk a little bit about Pickle. Now I use pH down, which is, you can pick that up just about anywhere, Walmart or anywhere. I don't want to really plug some places for us, but it's readily available and it works real good as a pickle. Now they've got a lot of other ones, but I find this works great. I don't have any problems with it like I might with some of the others. Now the mixture on this, because it's not sold as pickle, the mixture is 1 cup to 1 gallon of distilled water. Now you want to use distilled water anytime you're mixing your pickle. And while we're talking about pickle, I want to talk about safety. Now that there might be some background noise a little bit from the computer fan and some from my exhaust fan, because anytime you're using pickle, you want to make sure that you have good ventilation. And while we're talking about safety, now always remember to wear safety glasses. Remember to be careful when you're using heat. When you solder something on your solder block, it gets hot and it holds heat for a while. So if you solder something on this, now this is a nice and clean block, but it will get dirty from time to time. But when you solder something on this, it's going to get hot and you might pickle it, come back and you're going to do another solder operation and you go touch your hand to it and you're going to burn yourself. Remember, it's always hot, and if you need to do another operation that's going to take getting close to it, just take your block, and you got a solder pad here, turn your block over and use the other side of it. That gives that one side a chance to cool down, and you're working with the cool surface. So always remember to be careful around the heat. Remember to be careful around your chemicals. If you're oxidizing or something, you might use silver black or one of those. And when you're using hydrochloric acid, I mean, it's easy to get burnt, so take precautions. You know, if you're going to be oxidizing, use some latex gloves or something to make sure that you don't get it on your hands. Make sure you have some baking soda there. You're going to need to take and deactivate it afterwards anyway. But in case you get some on it, you can just stick your hand in the water with baking soda, and that'll stop it from eating away at your skin. But always think safety. Be aware of it, and if you're not sure, find out about it first. Don't just jump in and start doing something and end up with a problem that way. I hope this helps you a little bit as far as getting the things together, knowing what you're going to need to get started with silversmithing. And the next video, I'm going to go into pretty good detail on your solders, the melting temperatures, how the solder works, your metal, how it reacts, and stuff like that. I want to plug a Facebook group, though. It's called Jewelry Design and Technique. Now this is a good group if you want to learn. This group is strictly for learning jewelry, everything about jewelry. I'm going to do some live streaming demos on that group from time to time, in which they'll be in the file. So if you want more information and you want to see that, and I haven't got to it on my YouTube channel, well, you might check out that. And if you have to ask questions, it's an easy way to get in touch with me or one of the other people on there. They have a lot of good information. So until the next time, have fun and good luck.